I'm Alan Colmes. I want to welcome back to our microphones Professor Richard Dawkins. He has now written The Magic of Reality, How We Know What's Really True. Of course, he's now written for the God Delusion, one of his big books, among others. Thank you so much for being here, Professor. Good to see you once again.
Thank you.
Is this actually a children's book? Was that the goal?
I kind of had in mind a 12-year-old as my target age, but I think really it goes to all ages.
Because I'm thinking that there are a lot of adults, I mean, even when you talk about what makes the world work and what's a rainbow and all this stuff, it really has a great appeal to those of us who don't know. We don't really know those answers.
Well,
adults don't know the answers.
Yes, I mean, I like to think that. About 18% of the British population think it takes 1 month for the Earth to orbit the Sun, for example. So there's quite a lot of ignorance of science out there.
Well, here people don't know who the Vice President of the United States is or how many senators or congresspeople they have. Yeah. So it's the same kind of a thing. What motivated you to do this particular focus on this book?
Science is fascinating, science is wonderful, science is enthralling, and I wanted to bring that to a young audience.
A lot of people may presume this is the way to get them in the tent, the atheist tent, early. Get into their heads and let them know right up front there is no God. None of this stuff is real.
There's not really any atheism in this book. I mean, this is a scientific book. If people can draw atheism from that, well and good, but that's not what my aim was.
Your premise here seems to be, and correct me if I'm not putting this right, that reality is actually more magical than the myths that are created.
Precisely.
That we talk about in the Bible, for example.
If you set aside supernatural magic, which is nonsense, and stage magic, which is tricks, you're left with the magic of reality, which is what you mean when you look at a beautiful sunset, when you look up at the Milky Way and you say it's simply magical.
But of course, the big question, the cosmological question, I know you often say you're not a cosmologist when this comes up. That's not a guy who does makeup, by the way. A cosmologist is the world. Is that we don't really know how we got here.
We do not.
And if we could answer that, that would be the million-dollar question.
Right? I mean, physicists know a lot about it. There are certain unanswered questions, and very intriguing they are, and physicists are working on it.
But you don't have a theory about that. I know you're asked this all the time.
Yeah, it's not up to me to have a theory about it. I mean, I'm a biologist. I try to keep up with cosmologists and physicists.
But there'd be no biology were there not a world.
Absolutely.
We would not have life, right?
We need a theory of the origin of the universe. We need a theory of the origin of the laws of physics. And my physics colleagues are working on that.
And so, but once we know that, I wonder if we'll ever get that answer. Is that ever
fascinating to know? I mean, there are some physicists who think that we shall one day understand everything. And that's a very intriguing possibility.
Is there such a thing as a supernatural?
No, I think that's incoherent. I don't think it means anything to talk about the supernatural. I mean, if something appears to be supernatural, then either you haven't done your measurements right, or physics or science needs to be updated.
For example, you explain earthquakes and you explain things like meteorological conditions like that, tsunamis. Rainbows. What is a rainbow? You know, this was supposed to be this magical thing that appeared out of nowhere.
Rainbows are very well understood, and there is a chapter on rainbows in the book. I mean, it comes originally from Isaac Newton, who showed how white light is split into the component colours. White light is just a mixture of all the colours, and what raindrops do is to split it, and why it forms an actual rainbow, I do discuss in the book.
So it's not some kind of mythological thing. There is
are,
a scientific
myths
basis for it.
about rainbows, and I do discuss them. Each chapter does begin with myths, and I hope the myths are interesting. But then each chapter goes on to the truth, which is the scientific truth.
You're a scientist, obviously, but yet there are many scientists who also have faith. Can you have both? Can you be a scientist and have faith?
Well, you clearly can, because many do. About 40% of American scientists do have faith. About 10% of those scientists good enough to get elected to the National Academy have faith. So it's not very many. So
the National Academy is the elite group of scientists.
Yes, and the same is true of the Royal Society of London, which is the elite scientists of the British Commonwealth.
Isn't faith the opposite of science?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, faith is believing in things without evidence.
Why would a scientist then have any?
Good question. You'll have to ask them. I don't get it.
You must hang out with some of these elite people, though, and have these conversations, I'm guessing.
Yes, but as I've just said, only 10% of them have faith.
So do you believe only what you can see, touch, feel?
Well,
explain.
Broaden that out to see, touch, feel with the aid of instruments, with the aid of all the techniques of science, yes.
you talk about things in this book like who was the first person? We're told it's Adam, and then came Eve, and Eve took Adam's rib.
Yeah.
Was there a first person?
No, there wasn't a first person because every individual ever born was of the same species as its parents. But if you put enough generations end to end, as I've done in the book, then you can get back to fish, bacteria.
So do we come from fish?
Yeah, sure we do.
We do?
Yes.
Now, you talk to people who are anti-evolution, and there's certainly plenty of them, or they use phrases like intelligent design, which is I guess an acceptable way of saying I don't believe in evolution.
Yes.
And you think, I didn't come from a fish. I didn't come from an ape.
Right.
How dare you suggest I did?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, people take exception to that, but the evidence is overwhelming. Our ancestors 200 million years ago were fish.
So how could that be? I mean, I could see coming from mammals, but mammals came from...
you just got to add more generations. I mean, mammals is just a fewer number of generations back than fish.
Can you project where we're going, given that we were once fish and we were once apes and we were once...
No, it's much harder to project where we're going. I mean, we're probably going for extinction because most species have gone extinct.
Yeah.
But if our descendants are still around in 20 million years' time, heaven knows what we'd be like.
It could take a while, right?
Yes.
The concept of either there being nothing here at one time prior to there being a universe, or us being extinct and all we have here not existing, it's incomprehensible.
Yes, it is incomprehensible. But physicists are working on it, as I said. Recommend Lawrence Krauss's book, which is called, I think, A Universe from Nothing, and he talks about the very origin of everything.
Who is he?
Who is what?
Lawrence
Krauss.
Yeah, I'm not...
Krauss. He's a very distinguished physicist at Arizona State University.
You know all these famous people. I don't really know them, but it's great to hear that.
Well, have him on your show.
I probably should. I'm fascinated by how this all started. Yeah. Who informed you? Who are your models for where you decided, that there were people you've read growing up, the people that you saw, and informed your view based on other scientists?
Charles Darwin, back in the 19th century,
right.
and Darwin's successors in the 20th century.
Can you believe that Darwin was correct and believe in religion at the same time?
Many people do. I find it hard to quite see how they can, but there are people who do. So
is the concept of evolution at variance with the idea of there being a God or being a supernatural being?
There are many who will say that it isn't because there are many churchmen who are evolutionists and many evolutionists who are religious. My personal view is that it's quite difficult to reconcile them. We're
talking with Richard Dawkins. His latest book is called The Magic of Reality, How We Know What's Really True. Great illustrations in here by Dave McKean, which we can't show on radio, sadly. It is the idea, I guess it's hard for people to get around the idea that there is nothing. We come from nothing. We're going to go back to nothing. There is no reason, and people will say there's no reason to be moral, good, or just unless you have some kind of fear of a higher being or belief that you'll be rewarded in a hereafter. You don't buy any of that.
That would be rather an ignoble reason to be moral. If the only reason you're moral is fear or an attempt to sort of apple polish to suck up to a higher being. I prefer to be moral for good moral reasons.
So there's not – a lot of people feel, if the only reason I'm not going to kill you is because I believe in there's a God, and otherwise,
I've actually had people say that to me.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I was on a radio talk show, and somebody phoned in from Texas and said, if I didn't believe in God, I'd be murdering my neighbor. And I said, well, I hope that's not true.
Now, we're going to take a quick break back with Richard Dawkins in just a moment. Colmes, we're talking to Richard Dawkins. Do you like being referred to as the most famous atheist in the world? I mean, you often get that moniker, but
not much.
Why does that bother you?
I'd rather be known as a scientist. I mean, I am an atheist. I'm proud of it, but I'm
but that's a hook
that
people seem to.
It is, but I'd rather it wasn't that hook. I'd rather be known in a more positive way as a scientist.
The Magic of Reality is your latest book, and how we know what's really true. We were talking in the last segment about threats and people who, if there weren't for a God, might have offed you. Do you get a lot of that stuff from so-called Christians or or
yes,
people of allegedly of faith and this is the way Christians are supposed to think?
I do, yes, I do. But I should emphasize, as I think you've done, that this book is not an atheistic book. This is a scientific book.
But you're right. Your goal is to ground children, this is aimed at kids 10 and up, I guess, in reality.
In reality, and to trust in evidence rather than tradition or revelation or faith.
Right, but taking that to another level would be, well, forget what they're teaching you in church or synagogue or the mosque. Because once you embrace reality, you won't need any of that other stuff.
That's right. You should believe only if there's evidence, and the church, synagogue, and mosque have no evidence to offer.
Is one religion worse than another religion?
I think Islam is the worst religion around at the moment. Yes.
Why is that?
Oh, because it believes in not everybody, needless to say, but they do believe that the Quran is literally true. And you will find that people are actively committing murder in the name of the Islamic God far more frequently than the name of the Christian God.
But you know that millions of Muslims live in the United States peacefully, billions,
of course they do,
or millions around the world peacefully, not looking to behead everybody and kill Americans.
Exactly right, and that they're not really following the Quran in the way that they're literally told to.
And yet, if you follow Christianity and you follow what Jesus taught, you love your enemy, right?
Yes, Jesus was a very good moral philosopher.
Did he exist?
Probably.
There was a person, you believe, but
there's not much
a
evidence. There's not much evidence, but my guess is that he probably did exist.
And wasn't what you might call the myth of Jesus, or whoever we believe Jesus to be, based on even earlier mythology where there were similar characters?
Yes, there are other mythologies where you recognize the same things. Being killed, rising again on the third day, virgin birth. These can all be found in other religious cults.
It's interesting. This book is aimed at, as we just mentioned, 10 to 12-year-olds, and you're grounding young people in reality. People grow up. They are in families. Families, you become normally whatever religion your family is. I mean, if I'm Jewish because my parents were Jewish. Otherwise, I would have been something else. So kids become adults who believe they're grounded in a belief system because they were taught that from a very young age. Is it your goal to kind of pry them away from that little bit?
I mean, in the sense that it's not a very convincing reason to believe something just because you happen to have been brought up in a family that believes it. I mean, it's a lousy reason to believe X just because our people have always
It's like I'm a Republican because my father was a Republican.
Exactly. I mean, it's a terrible reason to be a Republican.
Were you raised in a religious family?
Not really, no. I mean, I was sent to religious schools, but my parents were not religious.
So did you sit there in religious school and go, I don't believe any of this crap?
No, not really. I mean, I did after I got to a certain age, but when I was a small child, I believe.
Was there a time when you actually were a believer and thought that there...
Oh, yes. I mean, I was confirmed into the Church of England at the age of 13.
And what was it? Was there a moment, an epiphany that you had?
Not exactly epiphany. I would think it was more gradual than that. And I sort of went through a stage of being a deist, sort of thinking there was probably some kind of intelligence behind it all,
right.
But not Christian. And then I learned about evolution, and then I thought, well, there's no reason even to be a deist, and so I became an atheist.
How do you, and this is because a lot of people glom onto religion because they can't accept that, hey, when you're dead, it's gone, that's it. There's nothing else to live for, there's no afterlife. How do you embrace the idea that when you're gone, in a few years, because our lifespans are so short, that's it. Goodbye.
It's a terrible reason to believe something just because you'd like to believe it. I mean, what's true is true, whether you like it or not.
So when you're dead, that's it. There's nothing else. There's no afterlife. There's no spirit. There's no.
Why should there be? I mean, we've evolved brains, and brains have developed consciousness, and when our brains go, the consciousness goes.
You wonder if somewhere in the universe, as long as we mentioned cosmology earlier, is there another species, another living entity or group of them that are so far beyond us, they look down upon us and say, these people who are religious are a bunch of morons.
Yes. I should think it's highly likely.
You think it's highly likely?
I do have a chapter called Are We Alone in the Magic of Reality? And that chapter is about whether there is life elsewhere in the universe.
And what do you think about that?
Well, I think there probably is, but I consider the other possibility as well.
And if there is life, is it more advanced than us, do you think, or behind what we are?
I would expect some of it is ahead of us and some of it is behind us. If we ever make contact with it, which I think is unlikely, then it's likely to be ahead of us.
You believe we'll be extinct one day, which, as we mentioned earlier, another hard concept to embrace. How long will it take, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I don't even know that we will.
Well, we might blow ourselves up, given what we do with weapons. And,
yes. Yeah. And one interesting idea is that life anywhere in the universe Once it reaches intelligence, it then doesn't take very long for it to blow itself up. But I suspect that, well, we know that we're going to go extinct sooner or later because the sun is going to swallow up the solar system, and so we'll certainly be extinct then.
We can't last forever.
No, unless we travel way, way out to a different star system, and that's years ahead of our present technology.
The Magic of Reality, How We Know What's Really True is a book. What is? Do you have another one in the works that last time you were here, you said you were working on a children's book.
I did, didn't I? Yes. Yeah. I don't have another one in the works at the moment, but I've certainly got plenty of drive to produce something.
Is there something else you want to say?
Yes. I could easily do another book for young people, because this is only 12 chapters and 12 questions, and there are plenty more questions to answer. Will
the world be a better place when we get beyond religion?
I think it will, yes. I really do.
And do you think we are headed toward a post-religion or post-religion? I mean, all these surveys are always done about how religious America is, versus other countries, and yet we call ourselves a religious country. Here, people claim we're a Christian nation. Do we get to the point, in an evolutionary sense, that we are no longer a religious people at some point?
I would hope so. People say that America is a Christian nation. I don't suppose that grabs Jews very, very well, or Muslims very well.
No. Or atheists.
Or indeed atheists. Yeah. The United States is a bit of an anomaly because Western Europe is becoming largely post-religious, and the Islamic world, of course, is highly religious. And so is the United States. And so it's rather an unfortunate bedfellows, I would have said.
I've heard you say that Islam in its evolution is where Christianity was maybe a couple of centuries ago.
I'm not sure that I ever said that, but I think it's true. And plenty of people
then maybe
have
I've
said
gleaned that from where you've implied it, and I've inferred it.
Plenty of people have said that, and I think it's clearly true.
So does that mean that Islam over time evolves and becomes a more peaceful religion over time?
I think we can only hope so.
But you see the world becoming non-religious at some point.
Ultimately, yes. I think it's going to be a kind of sawtooth, but going up and down. But I think ultimately history is on our side.
Are the smarter, more intelligent people the ones who are less religious?
There is some evidence for that.
Now, people think that you're kind of arrogant when you say that, right? You get a lot of pushback on that.
Yeah, I guess so. I prefer just to look at the evidence, and the evidence is equivocal, but on the whole.
So when you said that 10% of the elite scientists may believe in religion, but you look at people who are religious and say, maybe you're not the brightest bulb on the chandelier if you believe this stuff.
There are some extremely bright people who are religious, but they're not that numerous in my. That would be my guess.
Do you get with your scientific friends and try to convince them that you're right?
I very seldom meet scientific friends who are religious. There are a few of them about, but not that many.
Not in your circle, perhaps. No. The Magic of Reality is the latest book by Richard Dawkins, How We Know What's Really True. Great illustrations by Dave McCain. Thank you so much, Professor, for being here tonight.
Thank you very much indeed.